Welcome to the Double Shot Drone Podcast, hosted by Davey Kieran and Mike Berthold, two professional Florida drone pilots and entrepreneurs.
We're live. All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to Double Shot Drones.
What's happening, guys? Davey and Mike from Double Shot.
Davey on the left, Mike on the right. We start this off with a little shot. It could be anything. Mine happens to be some kind of tea.
Yeah.
That was my Christmas gift from my brother, I think. But anyway, no, actually from my wife, I think.
Well, cheers. Merry Christmas and Happy
cheers.
New Year for our...
Happy New Year, all. Yep. So this is our...
Drones. So tonight, guys, we've got an amazing guest. We met Mr. Ken Fleming at the expo myself and Mike did a couple of weeks ago.
At the Sunshine State Drone Expo at Azalea Middle School in St. Petersburg, Florida.
That is correct.
Yep. And we had some guest chairs there, and some people were just stopping by the booth. We were trying to promote Double Shot Drones, and this guy stopped by, Ken.
Random dude.
Ken Fleming, everybody. This is Ken Fleming, and he just totally floored us for an hour straight. Davey's mouth was like open, agape, mine too, listening to what he does with drones and diving and basically recovery. So Ken, we're just going to let you have the floor. I usually have like standard interview questions and stuff, but
you're not,
God, man, I think
you're not a standard guest. You're
not a standard guest. So I'm going to say, let's start out. Hey, what brought you to start this dive and recover? So guys, what he does recon dive and recovery of humans, basically. Cold case. He solves cold case files using drones, aerial drones, submersible drones, and diving equipment. So Ken, how did this all start?
Well, first things first, Mike and Davey, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. The reason we're talking is because of one of my partners. His name is Vern Schertz. He's with AUVSI, which is an organization that has the Trusted Operator Drone Program. And I'm a Part 107 licensee myself. I started out as a pilot, was on track to be an airline pilot, and then ran out of money along the way. So ended up in the IT world and came up with a few hobbies along the way that I thought were going to be cheaper than flying. And then found out later they weren't. But I am a 107 operator. That said, I don't have stick time. So Vern's getting me on, he's got a whole quiver full of, drones above and below the surface and in the air and all that. So shout out to Vern at AUVSI if you guys are looking for above Part 107 trusted operator commercial, the kind of stuff that you guys do. He's a great resource for that. So check him out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you were saying that he would be a good a good interview as well. Guest. And so I've been researching him a little bit, and
and I'll talk later about some of the stuff he's been doing in the Carolinas using that equipment. So the way I got into it was I had gotten into diving when I moved to Pensacola from California in about 04, 05, thinking that diving would be a little more affordable than flying, which I couldn't hack at the time while paying mortgages and all that. So got into it, and I didn't have a dive buddy, didn't have a dive boat. So I went on my couple charters and this and that, and then I didn't have anywhere to go. And so I started diving springs, which is one of the springs where I got certified. And you look at the bottom of the spring and there's a little hole and there's crystal clear Avion quality water coming out of it. And you go, well, what's down there? They say, well, that's a cave. And if you go in there, you're going to get killed. Oh, what's it take to go down there? Well, it takes, years and years of training just to get into the, you've got to get trained to the cavern level. And then, you spend a year, 18 months at that level. And then you go a little bit farther, maybe 400 feet back in the cave, and you start using the rule of thirds and, multiple sets of lights, multiple tanks, triple redundancy on everything. And then you progress along that. So I did that over the course of 5 years, and kind of got to what I consider my own personal pinnacle of the dive world, which is discovering new cave. And everyone thinks that all the cave in Florida has been found, but if you get in a canoe or kayak and go, over 90 beaver dams and water that starts at 2 inches and ends in, 30, 40 feet deep, eventually you'll find something no one's ever found before.
So yeah, Ken, I was a professional guide, kayak instructor and guide for about 18 years. And I found a few caves just, paddling and then diving out of my kayak and just trying to explore stuff. And I found caves like along, Wiki Wachi and, Chassawitzka and, who knows if they're discovered or not, but I found them. So they're
Yeah,
out
and
there.
most of them are like, most of them you get beyond the level that the average person can get to, and that's where you find a Grim Reaper sign. It says don't go any farther, you're going to get
Yeah.
killed if you don't know what you're doing, and then you follow the line from there and go in. So I got to that. I got to find and name and explore a new cave with my partner Matt Bull, and then kind of reached the pinnacle of diving, and then took a break. I was between two jobs, finished, went down to Costa Rica. I've got a place down there that I've been working on since I was 28. It
Wow.
has 23 and a half acres, multiple waterfalls, and I've been doing all the infrastructure, lots and electricity and all that for many years. That's my 401k. That's my retirement plan. So I
Nice.
spent a few months down there working on that. Between December of 2012 is when I stopped diving, and then came back into St. Pete and started getting back into the working world. And I never got back into cave diving, never got back into diving because I didn't have friends in the area. And when you're diving at that level, you can't just return to that level. The guys who do end up deceased when they have disposable income and time, and they're right around my age. You get up to that level, and then if you take a break and don't start and work back up to that level, you think, hey, I used to dive here, I can dive here again. That's when you make mistakes. So I knew that I couldn't do that. So I was like, well, I'll get back into diving eventually. And then several years went by, and I started getting back into diving with some family members and friends just for fun. Go look at fish. They're brand new divers that are inexperienced. So I got to put my basic set on and just go have fun in the ocean and stuff, and a couple springs for fun. And then I saw these guys on YouTube that were using their scuba skills to sonar search, recover, and solve cold cases. And I looked at what they do and how they do it, and I was really emotionally struck by doing a mission greater than yourself, and the value of that it brings to families. And I also looked at it and thought, well, that's unsafe, and not picking on those teams. They're diving to the ability that they were trained. But I thought there's a few things they could do better, and I knew that I could do better. I knew I could be more methodical, and just have a different approach, a little more methodical approach. And the truth is, we need as many folks in the country as we can to do this work. And that movement always invites more people. Hey, turn on your sonar equipment, look for people. If you find something, call the police. So I thought, well, let me give this a try. So I started putting together the equipment. I was using just a fishing reel with a sonar bobber, the Garmin Striker Cast, and just looking up cold cases, going in my area. And I found a vehicle, what I thought was a vehicle, when I checked a few ponds, and then I ran my first sonar swipe out of a kayak, out of a Hobie kayak, a short one. And I also found out that pedaling the kayak and doing the sonar and all that's pretty rough on the back when you're getting my age. So, but I found a vehicle, and right around that same time, I ran into my friend Mike at Sunshine State Sonar, and he had already been out on a few searches. He had a sonar boat with live scope, and my live scope was not functioning. It was brand new, and it was actually a factory defect. I had to send it back. But I said, hey, I found something up here in Cocoa. We were looking for a missing veteran. I'm like, can you come up here and just verify? And he said, well, hey, I'm just working on my dive cert. I do sonar, but we always have to call in the dive stuff to someone else. So it was sonar and dive, peanut butter jelly. We just meshed together and started working together. And so on our first recovery, we're pulling this blue Chevy Malibu out of Cocoa, and we just get the thing out and flip it down, and we're just starting to film the inside of the vehicle, and then bam, 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 shots fired at the housing complex right next to us, drive-by shooting. I had officers from Cocoa in black. I had deputies from the sheriff's department were doing the dive. They were in their khakis and their polos. They didn't even have their gun belts on because they just gotten out of the water. They run to their car. The Cocoa deputy runs into the gunfire. They come back with AR-15s and plate carriers, and they all assaulted towards the housing complex, and turned out to be a drive-by shooting. Guy was hit in the foot. So that was my first recovery, and I'm right in the middle of wrapping the video. and the shots ring out. The whole thing's on camera. So one of these days it's going to make a great episode. So we started doing that, and a few weeks later, that was December of 2022, and then January of 2023, Mike invited me on a trip to Davie, Florida, to search for Karen Moore, and I couldn't go because I had some work commitments. So I stayed, and Britton from Depths of History, Britton Lockhart, went with Mike, and they actually found Karen Moore. And
after how many years was she?
So she was a 22-year missing cold case that turned out to be foul play. And
Wow.
and the theory is that the suspect, who is also a husband, now this is all theory, alleged, I'm not accusing anyone, but the theory is that she was murdered and then put in the car and then sunk into the pond. So I was disappointed because I didn't get to be part of that, but they did a great job. They recovered the vehicle. When they recovered the vehicle, it came with it came out upside down with windows either broken or open, and the trunk was open. So when they recovered it, a lot of, the contents spilled out. So they didn't believe him that it was the car because they didn't have the plate, because the plate was buried and the trunk was open and it was all in silt. They couldn't lift the trunk. But when they got it on shore, they verified, yeah, it's her car. And they found, I believe, 2 finger bones. And then it became the crime scene.
Right.
And so over the course of, I think 3 weeks, 5 departments dove on that location, and they recovered Karen Moore's skeletal remains from about belly button up, full set. But they didn't find her lower half, which we'll get back to later on as we go through these cases. So that was a huge one. That was a 22-year cold case. And then so Mike and I, after that, started continuing to work cases, going out and searching, and we'll work a case real hard or certain routes, and then we'll kind of come to a dead end. We'll be pending.
So Ken, you're not getting paid for this. This is all volunteer work, right?
Correct. So this is 100% volunteer, self-funded for many months, and then we finally put a GoFundMe up. I've got 25, 30 grand into this hobby.
We're gonna put those links up when I edit and everything. Cool. We'll do all that. We'll get all that from you after the show.
Yep. So I've got, a bunch of money into this, and it's something I do out of a passion. Between Mike and I, we've gotten about 3 grand from supporters, and it's typically right after we locate a victim, we get a small influx of donations for what we do, and then it goes quiet for many months, and we just continue to put into it. So it's a labor of love, and it's my way, kind of serving my fellow man, serving God, doing what I can to help other people out.
That's your motivation. You're doing good to the community.
Yeah. And Ken, are you using submersible drones at this stage?
Not yet, and we're going to get to that. So we did that case, and then we solved 2 more in April, about 8 or 10 days apart. So we were searching. We would work a case, run out of leads, and then ask family or law enforcement, or try to do open source investigation. And we'd kind of finish on one case and pivot over to another, and we would go on these different searches over the weekends whenever we could. Sometimes, most of the time working together, sometimes solo, sometimes with different partners. And so we were on the case of Robert Heika in Port Orange. He was a school teacher that was missing 2.5 years. He was loved by the community. He actually did his full retirement and then came back and worked another year just to be around the kids. He left to go take off and have a good time one weekend and never came back. And they had cell phone tracking of his phone coming back up I-4 at over 100 miles an hour at like 3 in. They had it going down one of the roads at 85 miles an hour. And so 5 of the national teams that are already doing this kind of work showed up and worked together on that case, and they covered 60 to 100 spots. So Adventures with Purpose, Chaos Divers, Exploring with Nug, Adam Brown Adventures, and Depths of History, and then a few others that work with Adventures with Purpose. They all came and worked on this case all over, and they did find a vehicle in Cocoa that was not related, but they never did find him. Police looked for him, sheriffs looked for him, and they even brought the FBI in. They did advanced cell phone telemetry to determine, hey, this was the last tower, this was the direction that it was traveling, and then it just went dark, and it paused for 7 minutes and went dark. And so I think Mike looked for him for over a year. I probably spent 8 months to a year off and on, working with Mike on that. Actually, let me back up, about 4 months working on that with Mike. I would say 8 searches. and we were returning one more time to search that road from I-4 to where we located him within a few miles of his house. And all the roads out there are just grid lines. They're very, very square with sharp right angle turns. And this one had a little S turn in it. And it's a turn you're supposed to take at, 35 miles an hour. And he was going 85. And so we were going back and rechecking ponds. So Mike and John, his brother, and a bunch of other folks had already done a ground search all up and down that road with ATVs and throwing magnet fishing and all that. And they had sonarred a lot of those ponds. So we were going back to sonar again. And this one was 75 yards off of the highway or off of the road, past trees, over bushes, you would have never thought a vehicle could have gotten in there. And when we went back there, Mike had been there with a search team before. The water was higher, and he had magnet fished a section of it that he could get to. When we went back, I started putting my striker cast bobber in there and checking the depths, and I was getting 2.1 feet. It was right after the droughts towards the beginning of last year. 2.1 feet on the other side of the tree stand, 3.5 feet, not enough to hide a car. And he was ready to call it. He's like, look, we've been here before. We magnet fished it. Let's just call it. And I said, well, let's go around the backside and maybe we can throw the bobber. Maybe it gets deeper and it's a little canal type of pond. Yeah. And as we're rounding the corner, I said, hey, up by that pine tree, find me a spot either on this side or that side of the pine tree, and I'll see if I can cast and get some depth. And as we're approaching the pine tree, Mike starts yelling. He sees the top of the vehicle. And so the water had gone from 7 feet down to about 5, and that was the only deep section in that pond. After that, it gets shallow again, and we saw the roof of the car. And we all responded, and then I went and did a dive, and the plate was only a few feet underwater. So I went down, checked the plate, verified the plate, knew that we had Robert Heike's car, and then did a vehicle assessment underwater, and didn't have to use sonar on that, but actually found him visually. And then just over a week later, we were back in the St. Pete side, working in Palm Harbor on a case for Robert Helfrey.
Which is very close to me. I live in Clearwater.
Right. Yeah, right around the corner. So 17-year Desert Storm veteran, 17-year missing persons case, all kinds of foul play rumors. He was headed to his friend's house, so everyone accused the friend of killing him. There were all kinds of theories, and Mike had worked the heck out of that case. He had searched every body of water, hundreds of bodies of water in that area.
So is he using drones to search some?
No. So we're not into drones yet. So we specialize in pond hopping in very, very small boats. So we're using sonar in a 7-foot boat that we can pick up and move very quickly.
So it's like a kayak, and it's got like these.
His is more like a dinghy that you'd put behind like a small sailboat or something like that. But yeah, and I have something called a pond prowler, which is a foot longer, a little bit faster. But electric trolling motors. Now we're using gas as well, but electric trolling motor. 2 dudes in a little boat, sometimes 1 dude in a little boat with a sonar unit on it. And so we get side scan, which is like a picture in time. It's like a dot matrix printer. It just goes, and you can kind of, see it go by. And then once we see a target, we turn and we use live scope, which is like flashing a flashlight underwater. You can see the actual structure. You can move around in real time. You don't have to wait for it to give you a signal. So I was headed to the next pond to put in the bobber. We run leapfrog. So I'll put in a bobber. I'll say, yes, it's deep enough. Check it. He'll put the boat in. I'll go to the next one. No, it's not deep enough. Skip that. Let's go to the third one. And we just leapfrog like this throughout the area and cover as much as we can, as quick as we can. And I was at the next pond casting, and I got a call, get over here, throw your dive gear on, get over here. So he's a few blocks away. I pull up, and he's in a verbal altercation with the HOA president, who's screaming at him, there's no way there's a vehicle in there, there's no way there's a vehicle. He thought that Mike and John were trying to steal his pond fountain, because they had just replaced the pond fountain. And there's a house here. This is, you turn into this intersection and there's the water, and there's no fence, and there's no way there's someone in there. We would have heard it. I said, man, with all due respect, it's 3 a.m. You guys are asleep, and you'd be surprised how quietly one of these can slip into the water. Oh, we would have seen tire tracks. I said, look, they already have a picture of an anomaly that we think could be it. It's in the right area. He says, oh, that's part of the pond apparatus. That's part of the drain. I said, well, it doesn't hurt to go check. No, it's a liability. He says, have your lawyer send our lawyer a letter. And I said, wait. if I'm a lawyer and I get a letter from some sonar group saying, I want to get in your water, my immediate answer is going to be too much risk. No. I said, come on, man. If this was your daughter, your son, you would want them to check. Well, Mike is a little less cool-headed than me when it comes to these altercations, and they start having words, and I'm trying to get him to back down, and it becomes a, well, we're going to call the police, and you know what, great, here's a detective you can call, Ron Chalmers. He's a cold case detective with Pinellas County Sheriff's. We've been working with him for a while trying to solve this case and a few other ones, and and by the way, here's the dive commander. We just pulled 2 cars with them 2 weeks ago. Call him too. Well, so we get a deputy calls, eventually it gets escalated to the detectives, and they say, yeah, those guys are great, let them dive. So with deputies on site, they let us proceed, but the HOA restricts me to snorkel only, which when you're trying to find a missing person underwater is kind of difficult. So snorkel only, I go out there and I come down on top of something metal that's kind of boxy and kind of slope down the side, and I can just kind of make out where it is, but I can't tell what it is. Nothing like a car. Come back up, a couple big puffs of breath, go back down, and I come down the side of it, and I feel glass door handle. I can see some pinstriping. I can make out that it's a vehicle. I come up, hey, we have a vehicle. Now it's changed everything. Now we have a vehicle underwater. It is a crime scene, whether there's a person in it or not. Let us put on our gear and find out if this is him. So they say, okay, you can put your scuba gear on. So, and they say, well, if this is what you think it is, send the police dive team. I said, do you know what it costs to bring a police dive team on scene, to roll their giant truck and all their guys and overtime?
And who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, and I said, we're doing this for free because we want to help people. So I said, if we find something, then they'll roll the dive team. So they let us dive, and the detectives want us to dive too. Put on the gear, dive down there, and I know the plate. I've been studying the case, and the plate is down in the silt, and the visibility's 5-6 inches, if that, to where I can't make out the plate, but I can trace it. And when I got to the NYD at the end, those are very specific letters. I knew. I said, I announced it over my regulator, Robert Helfrey, 2 Roberts. Robert Helfrey, we have Robert Helfrey. So we found Robert Helfrey. I think that's on one of the news clips. And then, they put 2 deputies on it overnight, bring in the vehicles. And
that was Palm Harbor. That was Palm Harbor, Florida.
That was Palm Harbor. So that was number 3 force for the year. And that's when I started looking at, being able to operate with drones. And there are other teams that are running. There was a husband and wife team called Team Waters, Dennis Waters, and he had built an ROV on an aluminum hull that has 2 props and some rudders steering, a lot of moving parts inside, very large, heavy lead acid battery, and a really large Hummingbird sonar unit, very expensive unit. Beautiful quality, but you have to run it throughout the pond, bring it back, and then hit playback and see what it saw. So,
how long ago was this, Ken?
So this was they've had that for a while, but I started looking at it around May of 2023 is when I started thinking about what it takes to develop a drone. Then I saw Adam Brown Adventures, and Adam Brown and Exploring with the Nug is 2 guys that do what we do in Atlanta, and they're great guys. And Adam had taken a similar concept on a lower budget and adapted it to a child size 5-foot kayak, your basic Walmart 5-foot kayak. So he put some thrusters on there, and he did some really smart things. Instead of having thrusters and all these different rudders, he just used opposing thrust. So much easier when you just have 2 moving parts, forward and back, and you can turn on a dime. And he built it, with a Harbor Freight case and a big battery and all that. So it's a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger than what I was thinking. But they were having success with that. The other thing Adam did, which was brilliant, was he used the HDMI out from his Hummingbird sonar into a video transmitter, and then transmits that to shore, and he's got a screen so he can watch in real time. So that's a game changer instead of having to wait. Plus, if you see something, you can do a turn and come back, which is the other one. You got to kind of, watch the whole track and then go, okay, I found something. Well, I can't go back over it. So I don't know where in the pond it is. I just know at what time it came up. So now I really have to launch a boat to go find it again. And you can't get a second view. So being able to have real time, you can see real time what it is. So I looked at Adam's design, said that's way better. Again, me analyzing, kind of open source, finally got his number. We texted and talked a little bit, and he gave me some recommendations on how the controllers work, some of the things he did. And then I set out to build one smaller, cheaper, and a little bit faster. And similar components, but a lot cheaper. My sonar is $600, not $6,000. My batteries, much smaller, and the whole thing's a little more nimble. It's on.
So you could use some more funding, is what we're. Right?
Yeah, but you know what? I wouldn't change this design because for a few $100s, I built something that's getting me the results of a $20,000, specialty purpose built, ROV. We call them ASV, above surface vehicles. So that's when I got into that. I also hooked up with Vern at Hilo, and he has a channel called Hilo and Sub.
Yeah, I checked it out.
Yeah, where he does adventures. So he has, I think, 4 aerial drones and does, drone pilot training in the Trusted Operator program. He started building an above surface vehicle based on the kayak like Adam had, but with a little bit smaller sonar and very similar components. So him and I are now building, while we're doing searches, we're also building and trading advice on how we built these things. My controller didn't work, his did, so I went and got a better controller for for airplane flying, and I was able to fine tune my steering a little better. He came up with a better solution for video transmission, because the first time I used mine, I had to do the playback method. So we don't have HDMI out on our sonar, so we decided, where Vern suggested, put a camera looking at the screen. It's not going to be perfect, but camera looking at the screen, then video transmit that out via HDMI to a screen sitting on shore while you have the remote controller, and you can watch in real time. And not a GoPro, but what we call a faux pro, the fake GoPro, $67 instead of $400.
You have any problems with gators? We have a lot of
that's on the diving side. Yeah, we've had a few aggressive ones. So gators are bottom up predators. If they see you on the surface, they'll. So we try to get down immediately and get down the main line and get down there with them. And then I don't have any problem with anything that's maybe a foot or two longer than me. But when they start getting bigger than me and they think they can take me, that's the ones that, or if they're food aggressive, if they're in an area where they're being fed a lot and they're aggressive, they're coming towards you. Usually they go away from you. But I've been in there with some 8+ footers, 10 footers, as long as they're not aggressive.
Man. So you were saying something about okay, so you got a guy on shore and you're down there in real time, and your IT background helps you like communicate with the guy on shore.
Well, yeah, so we're not communicating. What I'm talking about is we've got an ROV, and I'm actually gonna switch camera angles there. So that's the top of my little case. That's like a Harbor Freight case. And okay. I'll pop it open here for you. And I don't have a great camera angle on it, but you can see. So there's my sonar running a sim. And you can see there's a camera here, the faux pro we call it, and a sonar unit here. So the camera's looking at that. And then I've got a lithium ion 20 amp hour battery behind it. It's on a 3800 series Apache case from Harbor Freight, so an inexpensive case. And if I can swing this a little bit up, swing this angle up. So here I have an HDMI transmitter. There's the controller for my thrusters. This is another FPV camera unit, and I used to have FPV camera looking at it, but we found that these other cameras were more reliable. So I'm going to use the FPV camera so that I can have a visual forward view and pick like a tree or something to drive the ROV towards. But it's basically just a sonar and a battery and a camera looking at it and transmitting all that via wireless to the shore. And let me close that up for you. And then underneath, it's just a pair of thrusters. We got some antennas over here. And then underneath, it's just a pair of thrusters. And the whole package is on a 32-inch child boogie board. So instead of a 5-foot long kayak that I need a partner and a heavy battery and all that, I pick mine up like a briefcase with a boogie board attached to it. And I walk to the shore, set it in the water, grab my controller, and it takes off. And same thing, recovery is a lot easier, especially if we have to get over vegetation and things like that. So that's my ASV or ROV, whatever you want to call it. You
were telling us at the drone expo about that time, like the vehicles are upside down usually, the trucks or the cars. Sometimes the windows are open, sometimes they're not. And you gotta, when you're diving down there, you gotta reach in What happened that one time you reached in?
So that was the fourth and fifth case. So fourth case was Karen Moore, who I talked about originally being found, the 22-year cold case, the woman that was murdered. We got called back to Davie, and that was, I think, Friday. We went back to dive for her. So 9 months had gone by, and when they were stirring up all the silt on the bottom, they thought that they might have seen part of another car, like a roof line or something, but it had since been covered back up. And that's because you had 5 dive teams over 3 weeks in there. So they had stirred up and maybe found a second car. And their dive team with Davie PD hadn't been able to find that car again. The other question was, are there more remains of Karen Moore in there, or was the other half of Karen Moore disposed of somewhere else, in a barrel in some other location or something? So the detective kind of unofficially invited us down there to see what we could find. I went down on the buoy that went to her car's original location after it had been recovered 9 months later, and I'm sweeping with a metal detector, which is something that I was trying for the first time. And I'm sweeping with a metal detector, and every time I run across a little bump, I start feeling, what is that? If it's limestone, if it's rock, it's going to crumble in your hands because it's porous and it's soft. I ran into a hard piece that was like a rock with 2 little ears hanging off of it. And those I recognized as vertebrae facet joints. So what I had found is her lower sacral spine towards the bottom of her spine. I recognized it immediately. And this is all by feel. This is in zero visibility, complete muck, by feel. And I'm tucking it into my wetsuit. While I'm doing that, the metal detector had gotten loose for me. It was tethered, but it got loose for me. And it starts going. I found the car.
Ken, we're gonna get cut off here real soon, but we're gonna do a part 2.
All right.
Definitely we're gonna continue this.